When
you're saying it's not criminally negligent.
When Hankinson did it, was he found guilty in the court of law?
Sir, he was charged with wanton endangerment of a neighbor. He was never charged.
Didn't answer the question.
So was his actions endangering anybody?
Sir,
according to the charge. Well, you see, this is why people like me are doing what I do.
Bootlicking?
Wow. All right, so this is an interesting debate between Mr. Officer Tatum and Dr. Rashad Richey. So we're going to break this down, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised on my take on this, and I'll give you a little perspective if you're new to the channel. So Dr. Rashad Richey is part of the wonderful TYT network. When he first started, I actually got a little excited. I thought that he was very intelligent and was doing some pretty good debates. I liked how he held people's feet to the fire. I saw him do an interview with some Trump sycophant, and he wouldn't let him get away with a lot of the tricks and games and wiggling around. And I like that. I like when I see people not letting others play these games and these types of debates. That's one of the reasons why initially Jordan Peterson, I also had a similar level of like, wow, this is cool. I saw him doing these debates. I saw the games that people were playing with him and how he wouldn't let them get away with it. He'd be like, no, that's not what I said. I said it. And I was like, wow, this guy's a beast, right? Then I started watching him and started seeing a trend and a pattern and realized what he was really about, and I quickly lost interest. Dr. Rashad Richey, in some ways, I had a similar experience with him. I started to see a lot of the typical sort of TYT, left-wing partisan behavior. I started seeing some evidence of dishonesty on his part and of him playing his own games when it comes to debates and not answering questions like he just did in the beginning here. So I would more lean towards Dr. Rashad Richey, although I don't really trust him. I think he's dishonest and very, very partisan. But I could agree with a lot of stuff that he has said. A lot of his positions I could agree with. But I'm looking at the overall picture. Now, Officer Tatum, garbage. Absolute garbage. Now, is that to say I don't agree with anything he's ever said? No. I'm sure you can find something I agree with just about anyone on, which is why it's always strange to me when I hear people say they don't agree with someone on everything. No one agrees with anyone on everything. So saying that is pointless, right? What you want to talk about is the pattern. The pattern with Officer Tatum is I could bet good money that any of his positions he's about to make I'm probably going to disagree with, right? If I make that bet with Dr. Rashad Richey, even though he is dishonest and very partisan, I am probably going to do very well if I assume that I'm going to agree with his position. Now, he's got a lot of bad takes, a lot of things I disagree with, but I think overall it is fairly safe to assume I'm going to agree with his position to some degree. It's fairly safe to do the opposite with Officer Tatum. I can't remember any time that I've seen something I agree with him on. I look at him as a savage, just like I do a lot of these partisan commentators, whether it's Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder. These are people inhumane. They don't really care about the impact of their content. They don't care about the death and suffering and other things that, propaganda leads to. All they care about is their own selves, their money they can make, their channels, their fame, right? So not really a big fan of Officer Tatum. That being said, I think he did pretty good in this debate. Part of the reason for that is the dishonesty of Dr. Rashad Richey. His dishonesty has led me to a position where I wouldn't say agreeing with Officer Tatum, but I'm certainly more on his side than I am Dr. Rashad Richey in this debate. Let's see why. Quick note, Officer Tatum, the slimy little creature that he is, one tactic he likes to use, he's not the only one that does this. When he goes on other people's platforms like Dr. Rashad Richey, he tries to pretend to be this reasonable, rational guy. Like if you listen to him talking to Rashad Richey versus on his own channel, it's almost like two different people. Let's begin.
say a witch hunt, I mean that they're engrafting more officers in to bolster a case. If they really wanted these individuals
in the beginning of your commentary. And then you proceeded
to bolster their case and to create or continue what I would consider to be a witch hunt.
You called this a witch hunt in the beginning of your commentary. And then you proceeded to say, however, 50% of the cops who have been arrested, all right, they should be arrested. You still stand by that.
So the beauty of having a partisan audience and being a propagandist like these two guys are is it's very easy to always win even when you lose, right? If you listen to what Dr. Richey just said, a left-leaning audience is going to look at him as like, he just got him, right? He says, you call this a witch hunt, but then you say half the cops should have been arrested. How is it a witch hunt, right? So that's like mic drop to someone left-leaning. However, the devil's in the details, and the detail is, after they have that feeling of like, oh, he got him, do they listen to the response from Officer Tatum open-mindedly and honestly? Or do they close their ears and they're too busy celebrating a win for their team, the same way partisan right-wingers would behave in a similar situation? Let's see.
It's not a witch hunt. You're saying that two of the cops that have been charged, they should have been charged based on the information that you have.
Well, let me explain. Let me explain what I'm saying by this. It's because when I say a witch hunt, I mean that they're engrafting more officers in to bolster a case. If they really wanted these individuals charged, they could have been charged.
I love the way he just does this like fake. No, what I actually mean is, the witch hunt is. What happened to the Officer Tatum that goes, "You's a bitch"? Where's that guy?
Charged on a state level, or if you charge them on a federal level, just charge the two people that are involved in the crime in which you're pursuing, and not try to add as many officers as you can, which is gonna weaken the case, and people are gonna be more upset because only probably two of these officers are gonna be indicted or at least being found guilty. I believe one of them already pled guilty. So
in spite of his pretense of like, hey, I'm the reasonable, rational guy, his response was actually, on the surface, very reasonable and rational. If Dr. Richey is doing a good faith debate here, he will acknowledge that fact or challenge what he just said and tell him how he's wrong, right? So he made a position saying that it's a witch hunt, right? Dr. Richey jumps in and says, how is it a witch hunt? How do people go to jail? So the response is, it's a witch hunt because, yes, we do agree that there is some level of some part of this that is genuine. That's not a witch hunt, right? They both agree on that. But the witch hunt that he's referring to, so he's qualifying his statement. He made a statement that says witch hunt. Like, Trump will say witch hunt. He doesn't actually do what Tatum does, right? He would just say witch hunt. Anyone going after him is a witch hunt. Tatum, to his credit, is qualifying what he means when he says that. And he says what he means is you take something that's legit, that they both agree is legit, right, criminal activity, and then you use that to sort of, I think the expression is, give them an inch, they take a mile. So the inch is the legit criminal activity, right? The mile is, I'm going to use that as a catalyst to now try to build this thing up into something much bigger than it actually is. I'm oversimplifying, but let's say there's only 2 cops that did something bad, and now I'm trying to do something where I get 12 cops charged, right? The cops beyond the 2 that actually did do something bad didn't really do anything, and I'm just trying to put them in this big net for whatever reason. Right? That is the explanation he's giving. Now, you can disagree with that position, and you can say, no, it's more than 2 cops or whatever. Like, that would be a legitimate response to it. But you need to challenge his position that they're taking something legitimate and trying to make it bigger, right? You need to challenge that and say how that's wrong. Or a good faith debate, you need to acknowledge that, okay, I understand what you mean when you say witch hunt. That's not what I thought you meant. I thought you were saying the whole thing is a witch hunt, which didn't make sense. But now you've clarified your position. Let's move on to something else, right? The dishonest thing would be to just pretend like you didn't recognize that he had a good response and explained himself, and just kind of move on. Let's see what he does.
This is just another element that I believe the federal government is wasting taxpayer dollars on. They could go after the two individuals that they believe they have probable cause for, and the other two individuals they're trying to stack it to bolster their case, which is, in my opinion, a witch hunt.
The scope of this.
I like how he also says in his opinion. So he's clarifying that he's not making a factual statement. He is presenting his personal opinion, right? Which he's entitled to, we're all entitled to. I think it's interesting that he adds that piece of information. Now, this is one of the ways that a lot of these propagandists can actually get people in their webs, right? If I didn't know anything about Officer Tatum and I saw this interview, and I already knew about Dr. Richey and how dishonest he can be, and I saw this guy like showing him up, I'd be like, oh man, this guy's a pretty cool guy. He seems rational and reasonable. I go subscribe to his channel, and maybe it takes a while before I see his true character, right? Or maybe I never see it, because what can happen is before that time where I might have seen his true character, I see more videos like this from him that I'm like, yeah, good work, Officer Tatum. And then I start to drop my guard because I get this level of like, he's a good guy, he's telling the truth, he's holding people's feet to the fire, right? And now I have this emotional connection to him as, someone I trust, right? So now he can now get away with a lot of dishonest and all kinds of different behavior, because I'm not going to hold his feet to the fire anymore, because I'm now sort of partial to him. That's how a lot of the audiences that watch partisan left-wing and right-wing media is how to get caught up, right? The same way Jordan Peterson, attracted me at first, right? Got me at first, right? Other people will get caught up as well. The only difference is maybe they drop their guard too soon, but they never realize. They never wait a minute, hold on, what's happening here? That never happens for them. So they end up dropping their guard. They get this connection. They get this sort of idolizing of the person. And then once you get in that mode, the person can get away with a lot of stuff, and you won't see it. You won't recognize it. And someone like me will come to you and say, hey, man, look at what he's doing. He's lying. And you will deny it, right? Officer Richey. I would say Officer Richey. Dr. Richey, I know his fans, same way. If I go talk to his fans about how dishonest he is, they're not going to believe me. They're going to tell me I'm a right-winger or whatever. If I talk to conservatives, who don't already recognize Officer Tatum for what he is, and I talk to them about how dishonest he is and just the reality of what he is, same thing. They're going to reject it. I'm some liberal, whatever, right? And that is how you capture an audience into a sort of digital cult in some ways. Cult of personality, for sure.
John. The scope of this federal indictment talks about the reckless conduct directly at Miss Taylor. As an officer, let me ask you this. Have you ever, without verifying...
So just so you're not aware, he did exactly what I said he would do if he was a dishonest actor. He didn't acknowledge the point that Officer Tatum made. He didn't acknowledge it, and he's not challenging it either. He's completely moving on to a completely different point. Let me ask you this. Right? This is unrelated to the whole witch hunt thing. Right? He didn't concede the point. Didn't concede, didn't challenge, he just simply moved on. So his audience won't even notice that. His audience will actually think that he won. And they in their minds, they'll say, oh, he tried to say it's a witch hunt, but no, Dr. Rashad, he didn't let him get away with that. He was like, how are you going to say that? And then half of the people, they did do crimes and did it. Right? Tim Pool, Ben Shapiro, David Pakman, they all have this power of their audience. They can win even when they lose.
The identity and without a known threat. Have you ever, or known someone, one of your colleagues perhaps, that fired into an apartment, a house, a window that had curtains and knew not who they were firing upon? Has that ever happened to you?
It's never happened to me. Let me bring this to light too. Everybody that's involved in this is presumed innocent until proven guilty. I just want to make the statement that it appears that they have probable.
Presumed innocent. until proven guilty. Interesting words coming from a guy like Officer Tatum, who routinely tries to convict people, right, before having even basic details, right? Some left-winger does something and he's ready to, oh, they should be in jail and these people are criminals and blah, 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 right? He is ready to indict without any due process or anything like that, not even knowing a lot of details, someone on the left that seems to have done something. But now all of a sudden he gets on the show and he plays this rational, reasonable guy who is like, oh, you're presumed innocent. Really? Right. You mean like Hunter Biden? Has he been convicted of a crime? I don't think so. Is Officer Tatum willing to give Hunter Biden the presumed innocent, rational position? Nope.
Calls to make the arrest that they made, at least on two of them. I just want to make sure that's clear because people.
Well, that's clear,
they
but
may
I
not
would
be
like
found
you to
guilty
answer my question.
They may
about,
not be found guilty. But I'll answer your second question
sure, thank
about
you.
the behaviors that Brett Hankinson displayed was cleared already. They had determined that his actions were at least reasonable in the scope of his explanation. Now,
incorrect.
could it have endangered people? The answer would be it could have, but was it negligent? Did he have the intent to go and shoot through blinds to willfully shoot at a person that he could not see? That's not what happened.
Have you ever done that before? Have you known any of your colleagues to do that before? And you have told me no, which means you know it's criminal. Your colleagues know it's criminal.
It's not true.
Have you? So you've never done it. You don't know any other cop that has done it.
Well,
this cop did it. And you're saying it's not criminally negligent.
When Hankinson did it, was he found guilty in the court of law?
Sir, he was charged with one.
Was he found guilty? Question was asked, was he found guilty? And you can see why the savage Officer Tatum has that look on his face. Because he just did a mic drop, which Dr. Rashad Richey's audience won't pick up on. He said, was he found guilty? Was he convicted? Dr. Rashad Richey responds with, he was charged, and he's going to go and say what he was charged with. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Rashad Richey either is in law school or went to law school, so he should have a better familiarity with how the law works than most people. If someone asks you if someone was found guilty or was convicted, why would you respond that they were charged? Does he not understand the distinction between being found guilty and being charged? So that's in case people are not aware. So charge versus conviction. Being charged with a crime merely means that the government has formally accused a person of a crime. A person charged with a crime is, by law, innocent. Being convicted of a crime means that the person has pled guilty or has been found guilty after trial. A person convicted of a crime, by law, guilty. So the devil's in the details. If this is something that hasn't gone to trial yet, then it's potentially semantics. If you're talking about whether they've been convicted, you can't be convicted until you go through the legal process, right? So the fact that you're not convicted before the end of the process doesn't really mean anything, right? We have to wait until the process is done to see whether you are going to be convicted or not, right? But if the process has completed and they were not found guilty, seeing that this is the point that Officer Tatum is making, he's like, he was judged by, a jury of his peers or whatever, and based on the law and our justice system, they have found that the person was actually not guilty, right? So you can't respond to that and say that they were charged. Many people get charged of things that they're found innocent of or not found guilty of. At the end of the day, there's even people who are charged and convicted who actually didn't actually do what they were accused of. So making a big deal about someone being charged, aka accused, I don't know, man. I expect better from somebody like Dr. Richey. But again, question was asked about found guilty. You can't respond and say they were charged. If the process is not done, then you can respond and say, how are they going to be found guilty if the process is not done yet? They haven't gone to trial yet, right? What are you talking about? Like, that's a valid response. A valid response is not to go to a lower level. He's talking about the completion, right? The outcome. Was the outcome found guilty? You can't go to way in the beginning to accusation. Were they found to be guilty? Oh, they were accused of being guilty. What? Anyway.
Wanton endangerment of a neighbor. He was never charged criminally negligent.
When Hankinson did it, was he found guilty in the court of law?
Sir, he was charged with wanton endangerment of a neighbor. He was never charged. So
was his actions in danger?
What is the relevance of the fact that they were accused of something in the United States of America? Unfortunately, his lack of integrity in this debate has me agreeing with this savage Officer Tatum, who said before, presumed innocent. Right now, Dr. Richey is ignoring that standard of presumed innocence. And he's making a big case on how big of an accusation, aka charges, that were made.
Injuring anybody,
Sir,
according to the charge.
This is very simple.
And then the sir. He does that a lot. When Officer Tatum's trying to say something, he cuts him off, and he's like, sir, and he talks about something else. I appreciate if Officer Tatum was doing his normal thing and he's just on some nonsense, you shut him down. But in this case, it's Dr. Richey that's on some nonsense.
Simple. All right, let me take you back to elementary school. The officer.
Let me take you back to elementary school. He asked if he was convicted. You respond and say he was charged. And now you have the arrogance to talk about, oh, let me take you back to elementary school. Okay.
The officer in question has never been charged with the crime in relationship to Breonna Taylor, number one. Number two, the federal government has concurrent jurisdiction to investigate.
This is actually a very effective technique he's using. It doesn't really matter what he's saying. Saying these things with confidence and so definitive, and then adding the numbers to it. Number one, such and such, and blah, 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 blah. Number two, such and such, and da 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 da, and this and da da da. And on the third point, such and such. It doesn't even matter what these points are. It sounds like he's making a point and he's like shutting this guy down. And look at Officer Tatum smirking, and because he knows he can't challenge. Yeah, not good faith arguments, in my opinion.
Investigate and to prosecute crimes in the United States of America. They decided to charge this cop with the absolute negligence created and with the shooting inside of her apartment, not knowing or
charge is just an accusation.
Establishing the target whatsoever. You have already admitted this is not normative behavior. You've never done it. Your colleagues have never done it.
I said that I've never done it. I don't know any person who've done something specific like that. But clearly, there's articulable reasons why he did the shooting in the way in which he did it. Because they charged him.
What the hell are you talking about? So let's go back to the original.
So notice, he says, what the hell are you talking about? But he doesn't really mean that. If he is confused about what Officer Tatum is saying, and he wants to know, quote unquote, what the hell he's talking about, then he would ask. I mean, he did ask, but he did it in a rhetorical way, which is evidenced by the fact that he's moving on. He's not waiting for an answer, right? He says, oh, such and such articulable way. right? If he really want to know what the hell he's talking about, he would say, "Hey, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean by articulable? Like, explain that to me." But he doesn't. He doesn't pose a question to him. I mean, he says a rhetorical question, right? But he doesn't really pose a question to him, which means he's not really seeking to understand what Officer Tatum means by what he says, right? It's just kind of like rhetoric, right? Well, what are you talking about? Okay, let's talk about something else. This kind of behavior I'd expect from Officer Tatum, to be honest.
Charge of wanton endangerment, since you want to keep it there. You are aware that it doesn't matter if he was found guilty or not guilty of that particular element of a crime external of Miss Taylor's apartment, that has no bearing on the Department of Justice willing to take a charge or willing to allocate a charge, or grand jury serving a charge up as it relates to her apartment. You do understand the difference here with the jurisdictions, right?
What I'm telling you is that he's not going to be found guilty because there's already a case that was tried. And you got to think of how they tried.
That has nothing to do
he was tried,
with the new case that is.
So he's trying to make, so that's the first time that he's actually making an attempt to respond to what Officer Tatum is saying. So he just made a position that he's trying to say it's pretty significant that the government would be willing to make the charge, because they generally wouldn't make a charge if they didn't feel they had the evidence to support that charge, right? They're not just going to, in general, do some frivolous charges and say, "Oh, you killed that lady." They got no evidence. They have no reason to believe they could ever win a case that you killed someone or try to kill someone, right? They're not going to go and then accuse you. If they're accusing you, that is evidence that they believe they can make a case, that you actually are guilty. However, charges are still just accusations. We got to look at what the outcome is. However, based on what Officer Tatum has just stated, it looks like this is something that is pending. So him making a point about was he found guilty is kind of semantics, because the case isn't done yet, so how could he be found guilty? Right? So Tatum is holding on something that hasn't happened yet. And Dr. Rashad Richey is stuck in the past of that there was an accusation made. I guess in some ways, the Dr. Rashad Richey might be closer to reality, because if it's not, if the case isn't completed yet, then the charges obviously are more relevant than the outcome, because the outcome doesn't exist yet. The charges have happened. What's happening now is a result of the charges. So the fact that what's happening now is a result of charges, and he's talking about charges, that means what he's talking about, I would say, is more relevant than what Tatum is talking about, because Tatum is talking about a theoretical future outcome, right? How can you make a position on something that hasn't occurred yet, right? Someone's speeding down the highway and you're like, "Well, they haven't crashed yet, have they?" 180 miles per hour down the highway, and your defense of this is that they haven't crashed yet. Okay. Righto. Anyway, this is the Baby Channel, the Baby comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well. The Savage Officer Tatum. Thanks to Mr. Rashad Richey, Mr. TYT. I got to side with Mr. Tatum on this one. Now, that's not to say I agree with him on his position on Breonna Taylor, and I'm strictly speaking about this debate and how it was conducted. And for the debate, I have to go with the savage on the left. Thank you, Dr. Rashad Richey. You suck.